Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us on AWS Supports You. My name is Clint Wyckoff, and I'm an enterprise support manager based out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Thanks for taking a few minutes to join us on this stream today. Here at AWS Supports You, we bring experts who provide tips to optimize your performance in the cloud, help you lower costs, and provide you with best practice and design considerations. Joining me today is Alex Head and Steph Gooch from the AWS Optics team. Let's start with a quick round of introductions, starting with Alex.
Hello, my name is Alex Head. I'm located in Atlanta, and I run the AWS Optics team. We focus on anything and everything optimization, helping drive customer efficiency.
And hey everyone, I'm Stephanie Gooch. I'm a commercial architect in Alex's Optics team, and I focus on telco customers in EMEA specifically, and look after anything to do with cloud financial management.
Fantastic, ladies. Thanks so much for joining us on AWS Supports You, and we look forward to the episode today. But today, we're going to be focusing on cost optimization tips, specifically from the Optics team, and we'll talk about what that means here a little bit more in a few minutes. And the ladies also have their own show on the AWS Twitch, which is called Keys to AWS Optimization, which airs every Thursday. Quick shout out to you ladies. You'll be able to talk about your show here as well. But before we get into the details, a quick note to the attendees online. Please feel free to utilize the chat off to the right-hand side of the screen there. We're very interested in A, hearing your questions. We'll be answering those live, but also B, where you're joining us from today. So throw your location in the chat there, so that way we can see where everyone's tuning in from. We look forward to hearing from you. We're also going to be providing a link to a survey. We're very interested in hearing how we did today specifically on the show. And we also want to hear some possible show topics and things for the future. Who knows, your idea might be featured on a future episode of AWS Supports You, right? So I believe you are going to kick us off first, Steph. So you want to give us a quick rundown of what we're going to be talking about today?
Yeah, so if you're tuning in today, the big thing is, do you want to see your costs? So we're going to be looking at some questions that have been posted by you guys, and we're going to be answering those, focusing on three main topics. But before we dive into that, we do want to mention our Twitch show. So that, like Clint said, the keys to AWS optimization. So we share stories, concepts, and solutions to help you unlock your spend. So if you like what me and Alex say today, and you want to learn a little bit more about optimization at Amazon, you can come see us here on Twitch, or we have all of our videos on YouTube, so you can go back and have a look.
All right. Also, if you like what we're saying today, fill out that survey. And if you don't like what we're saying today, you can pretend not to. Yeah, ignore it. Before we jump into questions, we've thrown around the term optics a couple of times now. So just a quick overview on what our team is and why you should trust us or listen to us, or why our opinion might be helpful while going through these questions. So Optics stands for Optimization Intelligence for Cloud Systems. We connect the dots for finance, business, and technology when it comes to AWS. Our team is divided up by industry, so everyone on the team is dedicated to different industries. Steph herself is our telco person, and our architects and specialists are driving customer efficiency and teaching as much as we can, which is why things like this are a great resource, because it just gives us more content to help scale and teach our customers and find different ways to understand cost and usage and optimization.
Yeah. Okay, so into our first question. So the questions, we have three questions today. This first one is actually from, I went to a meetup for the FinOps Foundation. So a little shout out to them if you're interested in learning more about cloud financial management. The FinOps org is a great place to start. And this question came up from a topic that there was a big survey done with them, and we thought this was a really interesting topic to cover. So how do I manage shared costs at Amazon? Which is a big question we hear a lot of our customers look at when it comes to things like chargeback.
Yeah, so shared costs usually go into when you're thinking about managing them and you're thinking about the different options. It usually comes back to either show back or chargeback. And chargeback would be where you're actually going into the cost center and billing them for what they used. Show back would be you're letting them see it, right? But maybe you don't do accounting of it. And so when we're looking at this example, right, we're looking at the cost and usage report, which is a report that you can turn on in your AWS account that gives you really, really detailed information when it comes to cost and usage. And through that, you know, you have team A and team B, app 1, app 2. How do you properly show or charge that back? Steph, quick on you to tell them how to go turn on their cost and usage report the right way if they don't already.
Yeah, that's a great shout out. And please go check if you've done this. The amount of customers I've had to set this up with in the last month alone has been crazy. And it's, again, people don't really know it's there. So I really recommend turning it on. So all you do is go into your billing console and look for your cost and usage report. My top tips when you're doing it, please tick the resource ID. That will add more data, more metadata about what is actually this billing information related to. What, when I say I've spent money on EC2, what EC2? And choose Parquet, which means that you can use Amazon Athena to run queries over this data, and also make sure that you overwrite the report so that you're always up to date with what is going on in your billing data. So you can see it daily or hourly. Again, I'd recommend hourly, depending on your organization. Again, this will make more data, but it does give you that granularity so that you can look and see when you're using things of what you're using.
Yes, perfect. So that cost and usage report is kind of like the meat of the cost and usage data. And so then you have to bring everything together when looking at these shared costs, and what way do you want to allocate, and like what way do you want to create a structure? And every customer is going to be different on that structure that they want or that works for them. This is an example that I shared at reInvent a few years back of, you know, you have this tiered approach where you have the management account, you have AWS organizations, linked accounts, and then tagging. The examples that I gave over here are actually very similar to customers that we work with, and you know, Steph and I were both customers as well. So things that we did as customers. So you have the management account, and think of that as like your entire company. So company Alex. In company Alex, we have a couple different groups that are developing on AWS, mainly B2B products and some internal tooling. So those are going to be my organizations. Then under that, I have the actual linked accounts, and that's where people are signing into the console and they're doing their work. And for that, we have a production and a development account. And I say, rule of thumb, do that for any product, any project. It is much cleaner. It's easier to charge back. And it allows you to show and charge back not only on product or project, but also on, hey, what all is in production? You know, still connecting those dots, as we mentioned in the front, with finance and IT and business. So you'll be able to show your business, like our production's causing us this, but our development's this. And then comes the tagging. There is Steph and I differ a little bit on this. I think that the number or the top 3 tags that every single resource should have is the project. So is it like, you know, version 2 project or this project for that? The cost center, and that would be, you know, your finance team would define that, right? Like how are they coding it in their system? And then this one is a little unique to me. I think even if you're not turning on and off resources, that you should have a schedule. So is this supposed to be a 24/7 resource? Making people think about that when they get started. Steph, what would be your 3 that you would kind of mandate to give that detail?
So if you've already taken away the environment information, we see a lot of customers do that. So they might put like environment, production, development, but that's good. Like you said, Alex, having it at that level above means that you don't have to worry about that tag. Some people might ask, like, why isn't that here? And you've got it in the account name already, so it kind of simplifies that. Maybe I'm trying to think now, what would be my top tags? I do think the product is really important. Having some kind of so there's a different way of doing it. Maybe you don't have to tag the entire resource of all this data. You could throw this somewhere else. So when I was a customer, we had all of our accounts and then we didn't tag anything. We had no tags. And then it meant that all of our metadata was in another database, in another account. And so we were able just to link like a key or link the account name to that. And then if this information changed, things like cost center in my old company used to change, it felt like weekly. we could update that in one place. You didn't have to do it. So I guess that's a bit of a tip. If you have very changeable data, either make it really simple to change the tag. So use automation, use CloudFormation templates, Terraform modules, whatever, or any kind of automation to do it, rather than having to make your developers go in and change that, because that can be very annoying.
Yes. So going back to the original question, right? How do I manage shared costs on AWS? My first step is going to be, of course, setting up that cost and usage report, because that's going to give you the data, but then also adding the levels of granularity into the data that will give you the right insights. Steph is going to go into kind of can you get the most out of that data with one of our newer announcements.
So AWS Billing Conductor, or ABC, as it is also known. This is, like Alex said, it's a brand new tool. So if you are a customer who has thousands of accounts and you have loads of account owners kind of grouped together and they need to see their costs, this is the solution for you. So the idea with this is you can create billing groups. So you can group those accounts together and then have them in one little section so they could have their own cost and use report. You can also attach kind of pricing models against them, and you can have like a fake payer or a fake management account to look at this information. And the big bit is, before, when you used to have one centralized cost and usage report, everybody could see all the data. There'd be one owner, and this happened to a lot of our customers. They would have a problem because the people who were senior, or the FinOps team, or the CCOE had control of that cost and use report, and no one else could get access to it. So they had to then set up miniature, what are they called? Member account curves in their individual accounts, and then kind of bring them all together. Now that central FinOps team or that CCOE team can have their big curve, but then the grouped accounts can now have their individual ones. So this is solving a lot of problems for some of our customers. So recommend checking this out if you are a massive customer and need this, or if you want to add pricing data to your cost and use report.
So those reports that are generated, can you query them like you would query the cost and usage report?
Yep, it's exactly the same. So it's kind of like it's split off curve. So maybe to go into that, so and we're going to mention it in the next slide after this one's on screen, is this cost and usage library, which is something in the well-architected labs. So if you haven't seen the well-architected labs before, they are a website which has all the different pillars that Amazon looks after, cost being one of them. And in there, you can find step-by-step guides to set things up in your account so that you can see into your cost data, or you can find optimizations. And this library is set up by me and some other TAMs in AWS, and it is the best place if you're getting started. So, I mean, me and Alex use it all the time, and we're very familiar with the curve, but sometimes you get a query, I need to see a service that I've never looked into before, and you're not really sure how to start. The curve is a massive, massive set of data. And so if you're not sure what exact line items is to start, you can see this. You can start off with this page.
Dan, the great thing about this, like when Steph first started putting out these query library, I looked at it and was like, I don't really know how to query things. I'm not going to do that. But the way it walks you through, it really simplifies it. And it's a great way to see, okay, is this structure that we've created working? Can I actually get that information out of it? And so, again, going back to that first. So how do I manage shared costs? First step is creating the granularity, then making sure that you have the right reports and where they are. And then, getting insights from that data. And you can start with some of these queries and then make them your own, right? Like maybe this is the query that I need to really get that with my account. Or maybe these tags are important to me, but not these other ones.
Yeah, definitely. And like you can see on the screen, the reserved instance savings plans, support costs, they're the big ones that we see a lot of customers need to share and distribute evenly. And so these can get you started. And we want you to learn about the curve. So the good thing is as well, these aren't set in stone. You can't change these queries. These are the starting points. So if you realize you don't need to know it per hour, or you do want to add your tag that you care about, then you can do that. And so we didn't mention this earlier, but in the tagging area, there's something called cost allocation tags. So if you do want to see that metadata against your resources in your cost and usage report, go into that billing console, look for cost allocation tags, and activate the ones that you want. They are case sensitive and they need to be enabled, otherwise they won't be in the CUR. The number of times customers said, I want to see this tag, and then we go in and it's not enabled and we have to wait a little bit of time. So if you've defined a tagging strategy and you want to see how it's working, go in and enable it.
Yep. Step 1, enable the CUR and enable resource ID. Step 2, define your strategy. And then step 3, make sure those cost allocation tags are going into your CUR.
Yes, very important. And thanks for doing this slide. So if you are a smaller business and maybe you don't care about ABC, maybe that's too much. It's you don't need that much information. You don't need to split yours off. Maybe you're part of that centralized FinOps team or that CCOE team that does need to see everybody's costs. And you want to get all that metadata we mentioned. So the names, the tags against your organizational units or your accounts into your cost and use report. Then you can use this lab, which is the data CUR connection lab, which is also in the well-architected labs. The word lab 10 times. And what you can do is that's this Lambda function that will go and grab that data and connect it to your cost and use report, so you can see all that extra information. So if you're visualizing costs or doing reports, it's all there for you. Cool. Okay, I think that's all for the first question. Hopefully this has given you some resources to go and see that. Clint, have we got any questions for us to jump in and ask?
Yeah, thanks, Steph. Thanks, Alex. That's a lot of very good information. The first question, I did answer it in the chat, but I did think it's worth calling out here, is from 41 Wolves. And they wanted to know about clicking through and sort of drilling in and slicing and dicing the billing console, and basically why there wasn't a capability like natively built inside of the billing console. And that's really where Cost Explorer comes into play. So I guess just a quick question to throw it over to you both, dealing with this on a daily basis. Like, from your perspective, what's the main difference between the Cost Explorer and the data that is in the CUR file?
Yeah, so the data itself is the same. Cost Explorer is the visualization of how to view it. And Cost Explorer is an amazing place to get started. So when you first log on and enable it, it's first, like, out of the box, it's going to tell you, is there anything out of whack, right? Like, does this month look different, or do things trending different? Then you can click on that. You can click and go further in. You could say, actually, I want to see it with this tag, and click that tag and go over. You can save reports. So the data itself is all going to be that granular cost and usage data that's driving it. Cost Explorer is just going to be how you view it in your account, right? So it's that dashboard that's brought up right then and there. The nuance is going to be, it can be either the one account that you're signed into, or if you're in the top account, the payer account, it's going to be all of the accounts under there. So it's,
and ABC, you'll be your payer. So it's another reason to use ABC is that you can also have your Cost Explorer from that. Just jump in.
The piece that I would add on top of that is, you mentioned it earlier with Steph, with the cost allocation tags, right? So you may have tags allocated to resources, but you haven't actually gone in, enabled the cost allocation tag. So therefore the tag would not be visible within the CUR file or Cost Explorer. So that's an important step to call out there.
And Cost Explorer is a great way to check that. Like, if you don't want to go through querying everything, do a quick check in Cost Explorer if something's showing up before you start digesting your whole cost and usage report.
So the other question from Gaffed Up is looking for best practices or queries we can use to get started. You sort of talked through that there with the CUR query library. I think that one ticks off that question. And then there was a follow-up question there around resources that do not have any tags yet.
So it's a great question. So like Alex said, you can see this in Cost Explorer. There should also be in this library, because I added it like a month ago, a query where you can put in the tag, as long as your tag is enabled in cost allocation tags, and you can see the percentage of that resource, type of resource, how much of it's tagged. So for example, if you look for the tag name, it will tell you on EC2, 70% of your resources have the tag name. Maybe S3, probably all of them have, but maybe there's some other ones that you might have environment, or things like Alex mentioned, schedule. So there is a query in the library that does that. And if it doesn't, then there is an email address on the labs feel free to contact us and I'll send it to you if not.
Cool. And I did drop the link there to the well-architected labs that Steph was asking about there. So the last question before we let you ladies move along here was about reseller discounts.
What's
what about them?
Yeah, so that's outside of the scope of the discussion today, where they were questioning, like, have AWS reseller discounts been discussed?
I mean, I think been discussed in how we would allocate those costs.
I think I understand the question here, and basically what my direction would be there is to, talk with your partner manager about any sort of reseller discounts or anything like that. That would be the direction that would send that folk in.
I'd also say anything, any discount or reseller, and maybe you're, using something from Marketplace and it shows up differently. That is the great thing about having these queries as your starting point, because it's really easy to add in that logic and to mess around with like what might make sense and what might not. So, might not be reseller specific, but anytime that you have something like that, that's like a nuance in there, the cost and usage report and these different queries are the best way to get started. And how do you manage that? Next, we're going into a subject about sharing different discounts, and that will actually help ask a lot of the similar questions that you would ask in that case.
Mm-hmm. And maybe one tip, if you are, like we said, going to Cost Explorer, just for general things like credits, discounts, any of that stuff, it comes up as quite a block thing on on Cost Explorer. So if you look at in your cost and use report, the description of the line item is very telling. I use that in a lot of queries when we're trying to filter out what's this for, what's Amazon giving us here, what are they taking away. It's a really helpful thing. So if you see the word kind of discount and you're like, what's that? Look at the description. It's my biggest tip.
Good tips, ladies. That's all for the questions for now.
Fab. All right, we'll move on to our next one. So this comes from a repost question. So was how do I share RI savings plan purchases across an organization? So thanks to, I think that's Leon on the question for asking this.
All right, so first I'm going to go into what is a reserved instance and savings plan for those who don't know. So it's a way to say you're going to commit to using something for an amount of time, so 1 to 3 years, and you'll get a discount at that. A reserved instance, it like showing an example in between, be like one RDS. And then savings plan is a commit on the amount per hour, so like the dollars per hour that you have. This is straight from AWS website. Anyone can see this. But this kind of goes through some of the difference of why you would choose one over the other. But the biggest thing is, I mean, everyone is different. Savings plans are a great place to start. It's like less error, user error, and it's just a little bit simpler in how we go about it. And then reserved instances have some really good use cases as well through actually needing to use services kind of outside of that compute world, or, maybe the way that you track it internally. But again, this sits on AWS website. You can look at that. But just going through what is the difference between what are these reserved instances and savings plans.
Yeah, there are, like Alex said, one thing to say before we dive into like when to buy them and things. I remember when savings plans came out, it feels like not that long ago. I remember getting flooded with emails from colleagues being like, oh, did you know this thing? And the way I thought about it, we just mentioned the cost and use report. So when I was doing chargeback, I needed to know, what's this going to do to my cost and use report? How is it going to look in the bill? So if you are nervous about purchasing something, you've always done RIs, how is this going to change what happens in your account? You can commit as little as $1 an hour and see how that goes. That if you can check and make sure that's a sensible purchase before you do that. But that would be my recommendation for like starting out, because you can do staircasing and you can buy multiple sets of savings plans. So you can start off with $1. That might cover a tiny percentage of your account, and you think, oh, this is good, let me just increase a bit more, maybe spend $10 an hour. So that would be also a good way to start. But where and when do you buy them? I think is kind of a good question. And how do you share them across the organization? So there's different ways to think about it when you're purchasing your RIs and savings plans. I might just shorten this just to savings plans to save saying that every time. So when you're thinking about buying them, you could buy them in either your member accounts or your payer account. And if you buy them in your payer account or in any account, you can let everybody else use them. What we see a lot of our customers do is purchase ones in their centralized payer account and let the algorithm do its magic. So what will happen is when you purchase a savings plan, it will attack the thing that will save you the most money first. So if you have a massive instance and it knows that you're going to save X amount on that and it's the best thing for you, it will do that for you. So it will make that decision. That's great because it means that you'd have to think about it. But it looks in the account it's purchased in first, and then it looks everywhere else. So you've got to be careful when you have that payer account set up. You're not spinning up random instances in that account first to get the most out of your money. Buy them in a centralized location that's separate. Now, that doesn't always work for customers because sometimes people don't want to pay for things in a centralized account. Maybe you have a linked account and you got a budget for that account. And so you know that you can commit $10 an hour on your savings plans and you don't want anybody else to use it. So you can do that. There are different pricing models for this. There's 1 year, 3 year, all upfront, no upfront. You've probably all heard these before. Purchase what your business is most comfortable with, just so that you can get that. But you can be spending a lot of money if you buy it all upfront for 3 years. That's a big investment. So just be aware of who you need to get approval from. And how do you allocate them? So going back to our last conversation, the cost news report will help you do this. So you can track what instances, what Lambda functions have used your savings plans. So to be able to do that chargeability, make sure you think about looking at where you've used it and you can account for all those costs. So I guess moving on to this one, when should you buy these things? And Alex, feel free to jump in and see whenever.
Yeah, so those were really going through. So here's your options, right? You have where you're going to buy it. What are you going to do? 1 year, 3 year, all or no? And then the things that you need to look at from an allocation perspective when you're buying it. And then this is kind of what approach you're going to take. And if you decide that you're going to take an approach where you're kind of hybrid, like this combination or fully decentralized, that really goes back to that initial question of how do you share it, right? So for centralized, that is going to be your benefits as single owner. The visibility is pretty simple, and as Steph said, it just let it do its thing. For trade-offs, cost allocation can be a little tricky. And making sure all your stakeholders are aligned, right? Because one person's making that decision. If you fully decentralize, then you might have a simpler allocation, but you have multiple owners. That's not as uniform. And, it can be harder to enforce some things. And then if you do combination of the two, right, you get both those benefits. People are included. That's a huge part, right? If they feel like they're part of the decision, then they care more. But it does increase the complexity of it, which leads to exactly what that question is how do I share these across an organization? So how do you even approach this combination?
Yeah, and if you do want to share them, then if you go into that billing console again in billing preferences, this is hidden. You can see where it says RI and savings plans, discount sharing, the little triangle. You have to expand this, and then you can select which accounts are you allowing sharing and which aren't you. Full clarity, didn't know this existed before I started working here. I think when I signed up when I worked in my old company, someone had already turned this on and done the work for me. And so when I started looking at this stuff, I was like, oh, you have to enable this. So go see what's set up in your account as a challenge for maybe today. Go and review it. And I think the one thing that's really the thing you have to think about is how much are you willing, or the account owner is willing to lose money on this. I don't know if that's a bad way of putting it, but if you buy a savings plan, you commit that $10 an hour, and in your account you are always using $8 of that $2, are you happy that no one else is getting that benefit, that you're maybe losing that? Or do you want to make sure that you're always getting the benefit of that $10? And you want to ask that question when you're buying them.
And is there a mechanism in place to tell you that? So this is, like Steph said, so this is how you actually would go about and share. I'm going to go back to this slide just to keep up. As Clint, what all questions we have come in for this one?
Yeah, so we did have 2 questions come in, and ironically, they go hand in hand here. And the first question was from Savient, and they wanted to know, what tools can I use to monitor how my savings plans are performing?
So billing console. Oh, Alex, you want to go?
No, it's going to tell you take it.
So in the billing console, I love the billing console. So you can see your savings plan section on there, and you can see your coverage and your utilization, which I think is going to be in our next question. So the coverage is how much of your if it's savings plans, how much of your compute is covered by a savings plan. If it's an RI, it'll be how many of your, depending on the RI purchase. So if it's EC2 or RDS, so you can see how much is actually taking some of this saving. And then your utilization is, if you've purchased them, who's using them. I mentioned that kind of concept. If I bought $10 and I'm using 8, that would be in your utilization. So go in and check. I think it's really telling, especially when people used to purchase a lot of, well, I remember doing this when I was purchasing RIs for my EC2s. And back then when you were using it, you would purchase for your maybe M5X large, and you had to use that M5X large. So when it came to reviewing our purchases, we would always look at that and say, oh, no one has any of those anymore. Maybe we should move. So take a little look and see how you're utilizing them. So there are some services in the billing console, to summarize.
I love this next question. Go ahead and read it, Clint.
So it was about which one I should care about more. Should I care about utilization or coverage for my savings plan in RIs?
I don't think I've ever been exactly asked this question, but it's important too. So it does go off of what Steph was explaining of where you can see that, right? But utilization first and foremost. If you're not using your RIs and savings plans, then the coverage won't matter. Coverage is really a business decision. We can't say, hey, the goal is 70%, because every customer is going to be different. We have some customers that are almost or are at 100%, right? So when looking, if you're going to think to care about something, care about the utilization. And if you keep that utilization at 100%, then start seeing, should I increase my coverage? Is this a good place in coverage? So forth.
For a second, I wasn't sure. Oh, sorry, go on, Clint.
No, I was just going to say they definitely go hand in hand. And you definitely want to be close to 100% utilized, but then from a coverage, your mileage may vary depending on your organization. But I would think, from a TAM perspective, the customers that we work with, we try to push them to be, upwards of 80%, coverage. That way you're maximizing the amount of savings that you're getting, but you're also not leaving money on you're not overpaying for something that you're not utilizing.
Yeah, definitely. I was going to say, I was worried for a second that you might say that coverage is more important. I had a moment when I was like, oh, wait, what do I think? Because like you said, I've never been asked this question directly. No, I remember going and checking my utilization reports and panicking when I saw that, like I said, that example of someone had purchased a bunch of RIs and we weren't using them anymore. And I think that's where savings plans come in, because they're so flexible that you get that benefit to people can use whatever instance they like and they get a discount. So it's always a good thing.
So there's one last question here, and this is from Robert Tables. And second, I do want to say thank you everyone for asking all the questions. This is fantastic interaction today. If you noticed your coverage is less than your savings plan, can you shrink that? Their example they have here, $2, right? So can you shrink that final unused $2?
So that's interesting. It depends what you've purchased. So if the last $2 was because you've bought if you bought your compute and you're not actually using that compute size anymore, to kind of get rid of it, I'd recommend seeing if you could migrate anything onto the instance types you've purchased. But there's no way to officially kind of change that number. It's all about how it sounds bad to say this, how you're covering your accounts. So see if there's anything that you can move on to services that will get covered is probably the best approach to think about it.
And I think really what this is asking is if your usage is less than your savings plan coverage. right? Instead of
if you've
Right.
overpurchased.
Okay, make sure I read that right. Because coverage, you would think of like what percentage of, so if I had 100% coverage, all of my compute would be covered. If I have 110%, then I guess 10% wouldn't be, or would be usage I wasn't using in that case.
Yep, cool. So let's move along here. There was another question that came in, but I will address that in the chat. We'll get to that. So over to you, ladies.
Cool. So final question. Where are these costs coming from? I ask myself this question all the time when I look at my bank account. What am I spending money on?
This is why our team exists. Yay!
So thank you to Amazon user 4210271. I thought it'd be good to read that out. I like this question specifically, and you can see it on screen. But so billing, I'll keep that one back on. So I think I deleted all my Amazon services last month, and then I'm looking basically, and then I'm seeing still that I'm spending stuff. So what's happening? And that in itself is an interesting question, because there is so many places you could be spending money without realizing it. But Alex is going to talk you through some ways in which you could see these costs. Some of them we've already mentioned.
Yeah. So where are these costs coming from? And a lot of these come in from, what we talked about before. Setting up that granularity that we discussed in the first bit is going to be really, really helpful to figure out where things are coming from. But you have a lot of different options. So you have the billing CSV, which is the simplest way. That's probably going to be the least detailed there. Cost Explorer, which is that visualization tool that we mentioned, and that can allow you to click through. It also really helpful right when you log on, it tells you if something's off, right? So if there is like charges that aren't normal, it'll call that out. And then the kind of end all be all, the cost and usage report. And from that is so many, you can get into so much more detail, right? So a lot of our partners use that data to give you a different outlook into it. That really goes into all these partner solutions. My personal favorite and close to home, because our team developed this a couple years back, is using that cost and usage report for the cloud intelligence dashboard. This is, I know someone asked earlier, like, what's a good place to get started? Those Kerr queries. And then the next thing I would say is trying out the cloud intelligence dashboard. It's all from the cost and usage report. It isn't yet one easy button, but it is getting really close. You don't have to have technical expertise to do this. And it gives you a really cool starting place from that. Steph, what do you want to add to our cloud intelligence pitch?
Yeah. Do you want to go back on the other one? So I'd like to like break down these components to it, because a lot of customers I'd spin this up with, we kind of just like bish bash bosh, get it deployed, and then they're like dashboard. And then I had this great customer who took us a while to get through it. Bless him. His English was a second language, and so it took us a while to have to translate the screen so we could get through it. And the best thing was he asked every single step of the way, "What is this? What are we doing?" Bless you. And so starting off, we've already talked about the cost and usage report. So get that data set up. There is another option to use Trusted Advisor, and maybe we'll kind of come back to that. But what this cloud intelligence dashboard framework will do is it will use your cost and use report, and then it will create a bunch of views in Athena. So there's a list of them here. So there's your summary view, EC2, S3, compute, and account map. And what that will contain is like a summarized version. The cost and use report is huge. And so we don't need all that data when we're trying to set up a dashboard. We just need the stuff that's important to you. Then using Glue, this is done when you deploy your cost and use report. Something I didn't mention earlier, which I do want to just harp back to. When you deploy your cost and use report, yay, you set up, your bucket will be created, you'll put loads of data in it. And then people forget that in that bucket, there's going to be a new CloudFormation template file. I think it's a YAML file that gets created. If you deploy that in CloudFormation, it will set up the crawler and the database all for you, so that every time there's a change, if you say, we mentioned those cost allocation tags earlier, say you go in and decide to enable environment as another tag, then you need to pick up that change, and the crawler will do it for you. So if you do deploy the care, check out that YAML.
And jumping in right here, I know that seemed like a lot of steps. All of that is in the link that is in the chat in the Well-Architected Lab. It references how to set it up okay. We also have done like this setup live before. It's on the QuickSight's YouTube channel. There's a lot of resources to go through this. So it might seem like, oh, I've got to do dun, 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 dun.
Yeah.
And it really isn't that much. And it always always documented. I can't speak English.
Yeah. I remember when back in the day when I was setting up the first time, didn't know that existed, and I don't think it did exist. So it's nice that they created that for you. So yeah, it will create the glue, and it will trigger the Lambda function and the glue to kind of get it all started. So it will create that for you. And then there's someone in the chat who's like, "Whoa, it's set up the glue crawler." Yes, it does that for you. So you have to deploy that CloudFormation. Just don't forget, because the amount of times, and I tell people to go do it and then they always forget. And it has to be in the same region that you deployed the bucket into. Again, another caveat that I found out with my customer recently, and you have to go enable your car. So this is a kind of view of the cost intelligence dashboard. As Alex said, there's lots of videos on how to dive into the data, what you can see in it, and there's a couple of different options. So there is the cost intelligence dashboard, which is the kind of the bread and butter. I think was the first one that was set up by a friend of ours, Ali, and Alex did a lot of work on it too. For sure, it makes it look nice and work really well. And yeah, so the first one, cost intelligence dashboard. I always say this is the first one to start with because it's looking from a billing point of view. So if you're interested in seeing your invoice spend, your kind of cost allocation, your savings plans, your RIs, there's also a really cool, I think it's called Optics Explorer, which is like a cost explorer, but you can add more groups to it, which is very nice. And so the cost intelligence dashboard, first one. Then you have the Kudos dashboard. This is more for maybe your people that are a little bit more hands-on keyboards, the developers who want to go into the per service aspect of it. So there's like a Dynamo tab, there's an EC2 tab, there's an S3 tab, and that has some really cool different metrics that take you a step further into that granularity. There's also the KPI dashboard, which is brand new.
It's close to me.
Alex.
I did the visuals on it, and so I feel very, very close to it. But it's really like that summary of all of it. And I know that that's a lot of options. But number one, it's super low cost. Like I think our largest customer on it is spending, that keeps it up and running, is spending $40 a month. It's so easy if you just want to spin it up and then spin it down. And then once you spin up, that's yours. Like you can mess with it, you can break it, you can delete tabs, you can do whatever you want. And then if you mess it up, you just redeploy it again. So it's very low risk and a great way to dive deeper into those costs and like nuances that you're seeing. And then bring it all to the front, connect the dots for the business and IT and finance, because you could have like a finance view, or here's my C-level view. And a lot of that is built in there.
I love the fact that you can change it. I think that's one of the most powerful parts. Obviously, we didn't go into, but there are many partners of Amazon that have dashboards that you can utilize. This is in your account. Your data doesn't leave anywhere. You have full control of it. You can decide who has access to QuickSight, who has access to change things, what you change. Just that in itself, because I warn you now, there is a lot of information in these dashboards. Some may say too much information. I would say it's all the information you could possibly need, and then you make the decision of what you actually are going to use. Don't keep all the dashboards about stuff you don't care about. Utilize this. If you don't use Dynamo, delete the Dynamo tab. Like, who cares? As I said, you can always spin it up again. Or one of my customers he really wants to learn about how to use QuickSight. He wants to develop his BI skills. So what he's doing is he's got the dashboards deployed. He's looking at how they're connected. What data are they using? What are the links between them? And then he's going to generate his own one because he wants to learn how to use it. So you can really break this down into the components that you like. And we mentioned the tags earlier. You can add that data. There's a good video of Aaron Adele, who looks after this awesome tool, going through how to tag, to take that tag data and implement it into your dashboard. So that, say you want to group everything by environment or cost center, you can now do it. But yeah, I think this slide summarizes well. It's cheap. It's really, especially if you use Cloud Shell, use the Cloud Shell version.
Yes.
Don't do the other ones. And you can make it accessible to anyone else. And if you have any questions about it, please, there's an email address on the labs. You can find this in Well Architected Labs. I think we said that, but you can email in if you have any questions.
Yep. So also one more thing before we jump back to Clint to see what questions came in, but this is like, we have it embedded in our team page internally, right? This is a really good way to, if you don't want to give someone in finance necessarily like account credentials to everything, to give them a link that they go and they see and they poke around in it. So that can be really helpful. So Clint, what kind of questions do we have on this?
I liked your shout out there to Cloud Shell as well as Cloud9. Our evangelist team would definitely greatly appreciate that. ADHD Bison wants to know if there's any specific KPIs that you found useful for small or large companies.
So this would be a longer answer, and we do have a Twitch show that covers this specific question, but my top one's always going to be, I look at compute and storage unit cost. So I go and say, all right, what is the cost that month for an hour of compute? No matter if it's running using a savings plan, no matter if it's spot, just across the board, because that can really track your efficiency, right? You could have scaled up really, really big, but you're doing it in a more optimized way, and that unit cost goes down. And storage is going to be the same. So what is my cost per gigabyte a month? And you could have put a lot more in storage, or you could have put a lot less. And if that number is getting more efficient, that's a really good baseline. And so I think that for any kind of customer, whether it's big or small. Steph, what would you have in there?
I knew you were going to choose the unit cost because you're the unit cost queen. Is your favorite topic. I always look at two that are my favorites because they're really simple optimizations. So your previous generation instance type. And the good thing about the KPI, if you go into the labs and you want to see what we're talking about, there are some demo ones that you can go and have a little look at. And the cool thing is at the start, you can define what your goals are. So the one I always demo to customers is, say, at the moment we've set it so we want to have a goal of equal to or less than 10% of our instances are previous generation. Now, that could be, if we talk about the M's, it could be like an M4, or it could be customers on an M1, which try and get off if you can. They're often more expensive. So I like to use that one as like a gauge of how the accounts are doing, because we often see a lot of customers who have spun things up and then they're like, okay, that's done. Let me move over here and start doing something else. So that could be a good way to kind of modernize, save money in quite a simple fashion. And the other one is the GP2 to GP3. So you can have a look. And if you don't know, for EBS volumes, there is a general purpose and there's GP2 and GP3, slightly different pricing models, but there is a like for like about 20% discount or different 20% saving when you move to GP3 versus GP2. And you can see all this information on the dashboard to kind of track your coverage. Not every GP2 should be a GP3, just a caveat, but the pricing information explains kind of how you deal with this stuff. And we've also done episodes on this on our Twitch show, like Alex said, around volume, so you can learn a bit more on them. Just keep plugging our Twitch show, people can come over.
And the GP2 to GP3 migration is a very popular topic that the TAMs have been sharing recommendations when we do MBRs with customers every month. That's one of the on a quarterly basis. That's one of the entitlements that you get being an enterprise support customer's quarterly MBRs. And we talk about these cost savings opportunities. You did touch on one other thing there, Steph, which was the right sizing of instances and choosing the more recent instance families and generations and things that have come out. That also goes back to the flexibility of compute savings plans, right? And being able to make sure that you have the best flexibility to give you that coverage as you sort of go through the different iterations of instances that come out. So I think that's sort of bringing the full thing, the whole story full circle.
Yeah, and just to go on that GPT thing again, if you are thinking, okay, I want to find out what EBS volumes make a good candidate, then go to that query library. Check out my GP2 to GP3 query, and this will find, and it has some caveats in it. I know this is what our main talk is about, but there are some caveats about which volumes you should move to GP2 to GP3, and the query has that in them and explains that. So go and check that out.
Awesome. And I just dropped a link to the unit cost KPI video that Alex mentioned earlier. We are coming up on time here, so we have time for maybe one or two more questions that have come through. So McCann AWS wants to know, can you give someone view access to a subset of linked accounts only? I'm assuming they're talking about within the QuickSight, the dashboards.
Yep.
So, go on, Alex.
I mean, it's whatever mapping you want. So, like internally, I could say on my dashboard, I want Steph to be able to see everything for telco, and her username would show her that. So you don't have to like recreate. There's a lot of great viewing options for that.
Yeah, the two things to highlight would be this row level security. So that gets really granular. You can define who has access to what based on kind of keys in the data. That is quite finicky. If you do want to do the linked account separation, check out the AWS billing conductor I mentioned earlier. When you have that miniature payer accounts set up with your smaller cur, you could just create it to those. So just like two ways of doing it.
Cool. Any closing remarks? Do you want to just quickly touch on your Twitch show there before we wrap up for the day?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for having us. It's been a joy to come on and be with other people's Twitch people. But yeah, keys to AWS optimization. Come check us out. The show's 7:30 Pacific, 10:30 Eastern, and we'd love to hear from you as well. So we have an email address, costoptimization@amazon.com. Any ideas, things you want to talk through, have a look at the show, and yeah, let us know if any subjects or if you want to come on as a guest.
And to echo that, things like the cloud intelligence dashboards and the Kerr query libraries, all those were created because of questions and things like these. So don't hesitate. Ask if there's something that you want to see. Tell us. That's the great thing about how we've been able to expand these is it takes that direct feedback and partner with you guys.
Fantastic. So let me just check. I don't believe we have any additional questions. So we will call it a day, ladies, if that's okay with you. We are coming up on time here. So just a quick recap. I've been taking notes as we've gone. So we discussed early in the episode enabling the Kerr, discussed the Kerr query library, talked about the where, how, and when of RIs and savings plans, as well as we discussed the cost intelligence dashboards. Those are the key takeaways. So hopefully you've learned a little bit more today about how to see and manage your costs on AWS. If there are any questions that were not answered today, please head over to repost.aws, where one of our experts will provide you with an answer to your question, and your question may become a future episode of AWS Supports You, right? If you do have feedback for us here at the show, you want to click the chat box on the right. You want to take our survey, or you can email us at awssupportsyou@amazon.com. We definitely want to hear from you, and we want you to let us know how we did on our show today. Next Monday, be sure to join us where we will be introducing AWS Trusted Advisor Priority, TA Priority. Ladies, thanks so much for joining us. It's fantastic to have had you. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.